The other possibility is that it's a mothership that releases probes that will come close to Earth or close to other planets, because it moves on a retrograde trajectory that is opposite to the motion of the planets around the sun. And that is a very good path, because it can release probes that will not need to chase planets. They will just run into planets.
I'm going to go ahead and bring on someone that you know very well, my great friend, Alan Steinfeld. So let's bring him on.
Wow. Thank you,
Alan.
Neil. Always really good to work with you, to do some exciting cutting edge shows. And you know, what people don't understand is the name. First of all, 3I, they think they're talking about the third eye, and maybe they are on some metaphysical level, but 3I, the I stands for interstellar. This is the third interstellar object in the last few years, I think since 2017, that has entered our solar system. And people are amazed. Where did it come from? What's it made out of? What's its message? The first one was called ʻOumuamua, which means first scout or very first scout. It's a Hawaiian term because it was discovered from the Hawaiian Observatory. There was another one that was smaller that didn't make as much news, and this one was discovered by the Atlas Observatory, as the abbreviation of. That's why they call it the 3IATLAS, because Atlas discovered it. But it's also interesting, you know, the atlas is the top vertebrae in your neck. It's the thing that holds your head up, the consciousness. It's connected directly to consciousness. So we're getting symbolic overlays. Maybe it's just arbitrary, or maybe there's a deeper meaning to it. But also bringing Avi Loeb on is so key, Neil, because, you know, Avi lives for this stuff. I mean, he wrote about the first one. He says, well, maybe this was just a passing meteorite, or maybe that was a ship that passed, and because he named a lot of anomalies there. So when this came along in July, Avi was so prepared. He was so prepared to look in detail. He's not saying it's this or that. He's just saying there's a lot of unusual things about this object that is not comet-like. Doesn't mean it's not, but it doesn't mean it is. And that's why he's a real cutting-edge scientist. Yeah.
Right. And and what I've noticed as well is that Avi, for example, is saying a lot more than he used to say now. You know, he's becoming more open, even though technically you could say he's been sharing a lot about the other interstellar object. But with the conversations I've seen of him now online, he's even being more certain about the fact that we are probably being visited, or something is occurring that is outside what we conventionally accept. Avi's in the room. Shall we bring him on?
Yes, bring Avi on. He's the guy of the hour.
Avi, welcome, brother.
Good to see you. Thank you for having me.
Good to see you too.
Congratulations. Avi, you live for this time, right? This is your expertise.
Well, I prefer to live to believe that I live for the future, not for the past or the present.
I'm sorry you've been so attacked. I mean, Ross Coulthard was out of line by talking to other people. And you know, it's what Francis Bacon said years ago. He said, the scientists of our days were influenced by the arrogance of ignorance, and we're facing the same thing 500 years later.
Right. I mean, people prefer to believe in various stories and to resist other stories, but the real reliable way of figuring out what is true and what is not true is by collecting evidence. And, you know, that was the trick that Galileo Galilei realized, and he was put in a house arrest. But in science, we follow that. And that means a lot of work, by the way, because it's much easier to speak on social media or to be a journalist that reports about what other people are saying than to actually do the hard work of collecting the data or interpreting it. You know, it's hard work. I would make the analogy with playing soccer. You know, it's very easy to express opinions about those that play in the field, you know, but actually playing and scoring a goal is not easy. And that's why, you know, it's a difficult competition. So doing the science, you know, cannot be compared to talking about the science, and a lot of people just talk about it. Ross is one of them, but that it should not be valued as much as actually doing the science. And I'm in the trenches. I'm writing papers every week, and even people that are popularizers of science, people that talk about how science is important, like Neil deGrasse Tyson, they're not doing science. He didn't write a scientific paper over the past 15 years. Okay, so I think the public needs to pay attention to the difference between those who talk and those who do. And that is true in any job. There are people who talk and there are people who are doing things. And those who are doing things, are actually investing a lot of time and effort, and you should listen to what they say. Those who talk about the others or about what might be true, are not doing much. They're just talking.
Right. I think the difference between a real scientist, someone who investigates the unexplained instead of explaining the uninvestigated,
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And, the approach that science takes is to collect data from instruments. Okay, so that's another common misconception that, because we, in the legal system, we do listen to eyewitness testimonies to what people are talking about. But we know that there are many mistakes made. Sometimes people are put on death row when they don't deserve it. And eventually the DNA evidence demonstrates that they are innocent. So the good news about science is that it's not up to people to decide. It's not a matter of a popularity contest. It's not what we believe to be true because of wishful thinking. Many times nature is under no obligation to make us happy. Okay, we are not at the center of the universe. We knew, that obviously didn't make the Vatican happy. And moreover, we might not be at the intellectual center of the universe. That's what doesn't make a lot of people who want to feel that we are at the top of the food chain happy.
Right.
So I think, as long as we allow instruments to guide us the way that, FIFA decides about whether a controversial goal was real or not, they are using cameras, and that's what I'm using to figure out what is out there,
Right.
And by the way, another important point is whether we say one thing or another is irrelevant to the question of whether we have a neighbor. Just imagine sitting at home and talking with your family on the question of whether you have a neighbor. Everyone may have an opinion, but that's irrelevant. The neighbor will not go away if you all agree that the neighbor doesn't exist, or vice versa. So if there is an object that all my colleagues will insist must be natural in origin, and turns out that it's technological, it doesn't really matter what they say. There is a physical reality out there, that is completely independent of what we think. And we can remain ignorant, but that will not change the question of whether we have cosmic neighbors.
Exactly. You said on a news station that you have a 60% chance that it is not a natural comet, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, we're talking about 3IATLAS.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
right.
what do you think what would it take for you to have like a 90% chance or be 100% positive?
Very, very easy. Either the object would maneuver, So as of now, we had more than 4,000 observations from 227 observatories around the world of this object. So we tracked its path in the sky, and it's perfectly matched to a path that is sculpted by gravity alone. So there is no evidence for maneuvering, non-gravitational acceleration. And I used that actually last week in a paper to derive a minimum mass for the object, because it needs to be very massive. We see that it loses about 150 kilograms per second, in the direction of the sun, because there is a plume of gas around it. And it's mostly in the direction of the sun. In fact, there is scattered light, which looks like a jet in the direction of the sun rather than trailing the object the way that cometary tails look like. That was seen during July and August. And given the fact that it loses mass in the side facing the sun, it's being pushed backward, away from the sun by the mass loss. But if it's sufficiently massive, then it doesn't. It's not getting moved much by this mass loss. So So we calculated that it needs to be at least 33 billion tons in mass, which means that if it's a solid density, then it needs to be bigger than 5 kilometers in diameter and comparable to Manhattan Island. And the previous two interstellar objects, Borisov, which was a comet, and ʻOumuamua, which we don't know what it was, they were both on the scale of hundreds of meters. So just imagine a scale of order a football field or a few football fields compared to Manhattan Island. It's a very different size. And the question is, why would the third object be so much bigger? And without us seeing thousands of smaller objects, it's at least 1,000 to up to 1,000,000 times more massive than the previous one. So that's very unusual. And my hope is that tomorrow, it passes closest to Mars within 29 million kilometers, and we will be able to get a high-resolution image of it with a high-rise camera on board the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter with 30 kilometers per pixel resolution. So we will know much more about its size. But if it suddenly maneuvers when it comes close to the sun, because that's the place where it can get the most gravitational assist from passing near the sun, and that it will pass near the sun on October 29th. So if it will come, and the Earth, by the way, is on the opposite side of the sun, so we won't be able to observe it during the month of October because the sun is between us and the object. If it comes on the other side of the sun in a completely different trajectory, the stock market may crash because that would mean that definitely it's technological. We put very tight limits on non-gravitational acceleration until now, and if suddenly it becomes, it gets accelerated a lot, then it's clear that it has some means of propulsion, some engine. Another way to get a sense that it's technological is, of course, getting an image. So, for example, if it's bigger than 30 kilometers, we might get a few pixels and learn more about it when it comes close to Mars. So I'm very much looking forward to more data. The other possibility is that it's a mothership that releases probes that will come close to Earth or close to other planets, because it moves on a retrograde trajectory that is opposite to the motion of the planets around the sun. And that is a very good path, because it can release probes that will not need to chase planets. They will just run into planets as it passes.
Is there any evidence that it could be a mothership, or is that just something? Because there are obviously pictures, UFO craft that are mothership-like if you look at the pictures. So why are you saying it could be a mothership?
Because it's a possibility. If it's technological, it would make sense. If it's a huge spacecraft that the size of Manhattan Island, of the order of the scale that Rama in the story that Arthur C. Clarke wrote, the Rendezvous with Rama, it was roughly that size. That's a giant spacecraft. All the rockets that we launched from Earth were smaller than a football field. They were smaller than 100 meters, including the fuel reservoir. So we are talking here about something that is at least 100 times bigger. And obviously, in terms of the energy needed to maneuver, it makes much more sense to release probes that will visit the planets rather than this giant object maneuvering, because that requires a lot of energy from it. But there is no evidence, and I asked actually my research team at the Galileo project in the coming months to see if there is any unusual activity near Earth. We have assembled 3 observatories, one in Massachusetts, another one in Pennsylvania, and a third one in Nevada. And if we find any unusual activity after 3IATLAS passes near the circle of the Earth around the sun, then you will know about it.
Are there any statistics that you've received that actually allude to it could be a natural phenomenon?
Well, it could be, but for that it needs to be just happens to be a very big rock made primarily of carbon dioxide, not much water, because that's what we see in the plume of gas around it. It also releases nickel with very little amounts of iron, which you often find in industrially produced nickel alloys. Okay, so that's another anomaly.
But it could be yeah, go ahead. I mean, it could be a piece of a planet that just got broken apart. I mean, right?
No, well, not a planet, but it could have been an icy object that formed in the so-called CO2 ice line or snow line. So around the star there is a distance where you get frozen water. You get the water ice. That's called the snow, the water snow line at a certain distance, about 5 times the Earth-Sun separation, and that's roughly where Jupiter is. But then when you go farther, there is a place where you get CO2 snow, which forms at a lower temperature. And right. if this is a natural object that formed in a snow line of another star, then it would be made mostly of carbon dioxide, and that's what we see in the plume of gas around it. But then you still need to explain why it's so big and why does it get aligned in its trajectory with the plane of the planets. So I think that the simplest way to think about a natural object is to argue what my colleagues are arguing, that it happens to be large, happens to be most CO2 rich, happens to be aligned with the plane of the planets, and all of these are by chance. And other than
by
that,
chance? If it's isn't there most gravitational pull at the solar plane, so anything coming in would be pulled to the solar? No, okay.
No, gravity is towards the sun from all directions equally. So, so indeed, the previous 2 interstellar objects, they came from very large angles relative to the ecliptic plane of the planets. And the gravity of the sun doesn't deflect this object much because it's moving at 60 kilometers per second. That's 600 times faster than the fastest race car that we're familiar with. It's very fast. And so even when it comes close to the sun, it gets a little bit deflected, but not much. It's moving almost along a straight line because of its high speed. So the sun's gravity is secondary. It's not very influential.
So what about I heard on one video that if we were to map out a tour of our solar system and go visit every planet, it seems like that 3IATLAS is actually on the same trajectory to take a very close tour of every planet. So if it's going straight and hardly being affected by gravity, so that means the planet's gravity is not affecting it too. So how is it creating a trajectory to actually visit every single planet?
Yeah, so that's a great point. And in fact, it's not enough to be aligned with the plane of the planets. You also need to arrive to the right place at the right time. And so it turns out that it arrives close to Mars. I mean, Mars moves around the sun, it takes years, right? So nevertheless, it arrives very close to where Mars is when Mars is there, okay? And that's a coincidence. So even if you adopt a trajectory that is on the plane of the planets, you need to arrange the timing to be such that when Mars comes to the right point, you are there. And the same happens with Jupiter and also with Venus to a lesser degree. Relative to Earth, it avoids Earth. So the sun is between us and this object when it comes closest to the sun. And so the question is, are these coincidences? Because then the chance is 1 in 20,000 to have these coincidences. And some people say, well, but it doesn't come close to Earth and it doesn't come close to Venus or other planets. And so they say, well, you can't just do a probability calculation. Maybe it's by chance. But you're entirely correct. I mean, it could have had exactly the same trajectory, and if you select the arrival time randomly, you find that the chance of it arriving so close to 3 planets, as I mentioned, is 1 in 20,000. It's very rare as well.
Is there a reason if it was a mothership, they pick Mars? Does Mars have any particular significance?
Well, it depends when the journey started. because as you know, the humanity was around over the past few million years, and we weren't that different from animals until the last century. Okay, so that's when we started developing modern technologies. So at its speed, if you go back 1 century, you find that this object was roughly at 100 times the Earth-Sun separation. Okay, so it depends where the parking place is for that civilization. We just don't know what lies in the outer solar system. There may be camps out there, or if it came into the solar system, entered the boundary of the Oort cloud, which is at 100,000 times the Earth-Sun separation. That should have happened 8,000 years ago. That's when humans started documenting their history. So it entered the outskirts of the solar system. It came from outside 8,000 years ago. It came within the Kuiper belt, which is 100 times the Earth-Sun separation, 80 years ago. So you pick where it started the journey as to what may have triggered it.
Right.
So are you saying maybe there was a civilization on Mars when they launched it, possibly, that they wanted to check out?
Yeah, it's possible. Well, Mars had an atmosphere and oceans, rivers, lakes of liquid water 2 billion years ago. So, that was a long time ago. But maybe they don't have, they haven't visited for the last 2 billion years, and they come to see. And obviously, Mars is at a location that would have allowed it to have life. And probably there was life on Mars, but it lost its atmosphere, became a desert 2 billion years ago. So that's what makes Earth very different. But who knows what the intent is? I think it's a blind date of interstellar proportions, and we should, in any blind date, my advice is to observe the other side before you have an opinion.
Do you feel that this, I know there's been 3, I believe, that we've tracked interstellar objects in our solar system, right? But obviously we haven't been looking out into the universe for that long. So do you feel that this has been happening often? And could it have anything to do with maybe the origins of humanity on Earth? Could we have these beings here already? I know you speak a lot about the fact that we could be being probed, and individuals or beings could be checking us out to see what's going on in this part of the universe. But have you ever spent any time thinking about if they're here already?
Yeah, it's possible. We were visited many times before, but there was nobody around to document it. You see, the documentation really started about 8,000 years ago, and that's a tiny fraction. It's 1/1,000,000th of the age of most stars in the Milky Way galaxy, 1/1,000,000th. And there could have been visits, but nobody left a record that we can look at from those visits. And it's possible that we were seeded by some interstellar gardener. That's definitely a possibility. And we know so little about where we came from and how intelligence may have arisen on our planet. And we should be open-minded. It's also not necessarily the case that we are the first intelligent civilization on Earth, because any record of what happened on the surface of Earth would, let's say, hundreds of millions of years ago, would have been erased by now.
Right. So tomorrow's a huge day. It's the big day. You have to tell 3i to smile for the picture. What are you expecting to see in the picture tomorrow?
My hope is the brightest pixel in the picture will inform us of the area of the object, and therefore its size. And if it turns out the object is less than 1 kilometer in diameter, then I would say, well, it's probably just a rock, because then there will be no issue with the size. The only remaining issue would be with the alignment of the trajectory. But if the size is bigger than 5 kilometers, it's the mass of the object grows like size cubed. So then it becomes impossible to accommodate such a huge rock, given the mass reservoir of rocky material in interstellar space. You can't deliver it once per decade. And so it would be a major question as to what the origin of this thing is. And the technological possibility will still be on the table.
Well, who's going to take the picture, and how are you going to get that picture to analyze it for the world?
So there are several orbiters around Mars, and one of them is the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter that NASA launched. Another, there are two others that the European Space Agency launched, and there is also a Chinese Space Agency orbiter. And on the American orbiter, there is a camera called HiRISE that is 0.5 meter in diameter that could get a pixel resolution of 30 kilometers. And that means that the brightest pixel will give us a very tight limit on or constraint on the size of 3IATLAS. So that's really what I hope to see. Now it's, there is a team that operates this camera. It's the team was organized by NASA, and the principal investigator is in Arizona, and I was in communication with him. And the question of when will the data be released by the team is open. I don't know how long it takes them to analyze. It could be a few weeks, or if they are quick, they might release it within days. As soon as I have the ability to look at it or analyze it, I will do so.
Maybe, unless it's a spacecraft, a UFO or something, maybe they won't release it. But
I don't. That's not the way science operates. I think they will. If they take it, they will release it no matter what.
Well, yeah. One last question. So even if it is 1 kilometer long, the fact that the dust plume, the dust cloud is in front of it, that's an anomaly that shouldn't happen, right? It almost seems like that could be some sort of propulsion engine.
Well, it could be many things. I tried to explain it naturally in a paper, and for that, we had to assume that it doesn't shed any dust, and because dust survives and then gets pushed behind the object, you should see a cometary tail. So we suggested maybe it's shedding only fragments of ice, and the ice gets evaporated, and therefore it doesn't have time to turn around and go in a tail behind the object. It's not clear what is the physical origin. This elongated feature towards the sun is at least 10 times longer than it is wide. We were just seeing it almost edge on within an angle of 10 degrees. And if you take out this geometry, which made it look not very extended on the sky for us, simply because it was pointed towards us, if you take that into account, you find that it's actually 10 times longer than it is wide, which is like a jet. So basically there was a jet in front of it, and it could be that this is the material evaporated from the sun-facing side of the object, but it could also be something else. This is not explained except in the paper that I wrote about it.
So you're very open to it being possibly just a new type of celestial object that we haven't seen before, that it could be a natural that we have yet to fit into our cosmology of what the world is, or it could be.
Yeah. And one thing to keep in mind is, of course, the story of Troy, the Trojan horse, where everyone thought it's a completely innocent visitor, right? And then it ended up being something different. So don't judge a book by its cover. That's a very well-known statement. And we always have to consider the possibility that there is something else underneath.
If we take a picture tomorrow and we see just a standard asteroid, that doesn't even rule out the fact that it could be a probe, because if I was an ET civilization sending a probe, maybe I would disguise the technology inside a comet.
That's possible, definitely. But to prove the point that it's technological, we need to see either a maneuver or some signal that was broadcasted by it, or some source of energy, if we see artificial light or some heat generated by the object, that would obviously imply that there is some propulsion system. Now, the other thing I did is a few days ago, I realized that the direction from where 3IATLAS was coming is actually the same as the WOW signal that was detected in 1977. And that's a radio signal from an extraterrestrial origin.
The WOW signal was a 72-second radio signal picked up on August 15th, 1977 by the Ohio State University Big Ear Radio Telescope. The telescope was being used to search for extraterrestrial signals. This signal came on a particularly strange bandwidth of hydrogen. Sending a signature of presence would most likely use in order to communicate with a distant civilization. This is the voice of Jerry Engman, the astronomer who discovered the signal, wrote "wow" next to its frequency signature.
The signal certainly has characteristics that suggest possible intelligence behind it. No scientist or engineer has been able to prove that it isn't from such a civilization.
It wasn't clear where it's coming from, and it so happens that the coordinates on the sky of the wow signal were within 9 degrees of this object. So the chance of a random alignment between the two to that level is 0.6%. And so
wow, that's a huge discovery, Avi. That's huge.
No, well, it's if the two are related, it's huge, but we don't know that. So I recommended to radio astronomers to observe the object and see if there's anything coming from it.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see what it's going to be, and tomorrow we get to see a little closer to see what the possibilities are. I hope it's a mothership, to be quite honest.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think we desperately need a wake-up call for humanity to do better than we are doing on a daily basis, and that this would be definitely the impact of an encounter of this type.
Well, Avi, I feel in a way bad for you because it's you against the rest of the conservative, astronomy community. Is there anyone supporting you in the science field and your ideas?
Well, I can tell you that my essays are read every day by 60,000 people, and so altogether more than 1 million people every month. And in addition, I get a huge amount of support from the public. There was a former pilot of the U.S. Air Force that wrote a message to me and said, because of you, my daughter would like to become a scientist now, and she keeps speaking about aliens. And there is an artist from New York City, a very accomplished one, that made 2 bronze sculptures that he donated to my office, along with 50 watercolors. There is a car racer that contacted me a few weeks ago, and he wanted to put my image along with the image of 3IATLAS on the hood of his car in a NASCAR race that will take place in 2 weeks, and I might go there to see it.
Wow.
And there are lots of things that are happening in which artists, and I mean, there is actually a singer from the UK that wrote a song and asked me for a dedication about the work that I'm doing, and that should come out in November, I hope. And there is a book that a poet wrote about, inspired by my research, and there is a lot going on, and I meet very interesting people on a daily basis. And I for a second, I don't feel that the scrutiny that I'm going through has any significance, because many of those people are just jealous of the public attention that I get. And moreover, they are missing the point that the public would like to see how science is done, so they want to see the process of how we figure out what is out there. Yeah. And that is very different than the approach taken in the past by scientists, where they have a press conference and lecture to the public what the public should know. And that's why science gets the bad reputation of occupation of the elite. I don't, so I'm changing that by actually informing the public about the work as it is being done, and the public appreciates that.
Right. Well, if you're right, we're going to throw a parade for you around the world. This guy predicted.
It's not about me,
I know.
I'm just the messenger, and there is something bigger going on. And really, I don't really care about whether I get likes or not. What really matters is, are we alone? And if not, we should know about it. And we should get inspired by a better role model, than our politicians.
Thank you, brother.
You're coming out and speaking about that possibility to the science population. We need more people like you. Thank you for your work.
Yeah, honestly, Avi, you definitely give us a lot of hope for the science community, because on some level, especially people in our community have become disillusioned with science coming up with a way of this is what the answer is, and now you need to believe it, rather than the ancient way of the philosophy of being open to new ideas.
Yeah, and the other thing is, that approach that you mentioned often turns out to be wrong. So even though the scientists say this must be the truth, and a few years later it turns out to be different. And but that, if you admit from the start that it's work in progress, and sometimes we make mistakes, and we should take risks and figure out what's really out there, which is basically the approach that the kid takes in figuring out the world. So I see science as a privilege to maintain your childhood curiosity.
Exactly. I mean, you're right comparing yourself to Galileo, who was obviously looking at what was out there, and they said, no, that can't be. So you're saying this is possible. Why can't it be? So an open mind will change the world. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Avi. Appreciate you, brother. Thank you for coming today.
That guy is so courageous, really cutting edge, really honest, really clear. He's not saying it's this or that. He's saying, well, let's see what it is, right?
Exactly. Presenting the facts from a neutral perspective. Well, these are the things that say that it could be something else. These are the things that say that maybe it's natural. And then we can make our own judgments from that. You have anything else you want to share about what we just heard?
There's so much mystery to the universe. We don't even know how the Earth got water. There's some theories that say comets bombarded the Earth that were containing H2O, and that's how all the water got to the Earth. But there's so much we don't know that it's ridiculous to say, oh, we know what that is, or we know what this is. It's ignorance, and this is what he's arguing against. Let's not be ignorant. Let's stay open to 100%. What else, right? So
no matter what, like, say that this isn't a spacecraft or some alien technology, right? Just to say that it isn't. The fact is, it's operating differently from everything that we have recorded in our history, meaning that we don't know what we think we know about the universe. A great example is that it's not being affected by the gravity of planets or suns. However, it picked up speed like multiple times in just a moment. It just started going faster. So either there's some sort of intelligent design there, or the whole law of physics of you throw something in space, and unless something actually affects it, it doesn't change its trajectory or its speed. We have to throw that out. So no matter what, just by looking at this, I feel can help redefine our science.
Well, I think we are throwing the old science out, the Newtonian science, because what these UFOs that are coming here are not filling up their gas tank to arrive in our atmosphere. So we need a new science. And I think Avi and a bunch of people, and the people that are on Portal to Ascension, are bringing in a new way of looking at reality. And that's why
I would say that this week also, Alan, is a milestone for the evolution of consciousness. And it's because of two things. Lou Elizondo, which I know some people, they have their reservations on, including myself. I know that you actually appreciate a lot of his information. But Lou Elizondo actually was on one of my favorite podcasts, Diary of a CEO, that is all about helping people become like millionaires and helping them understand all types of information with AI, emerging tech, finance. It's something I watch a lot. And he had him on that podcast, completely introducing him to millions and millions of people that aren't in the know. And then Greg Braden was on Joe Rogan yesterday. And, we all know that Joe Rogan loves to talk about these topics, but he doesn't go into the mystical. He doesn't go into what he calls woo-woo. And Greg Braden is the closest he's ever gone to it. And so just these two podcasts are two of the largest podcasts in the world. Get listened to tens of millions of people. So with this comment going on, with the disclosure movement, the congressional hearing that just occurred, I feel that we're in a really important time right now.
Yeah, we are at a turning point in our culture. I mean, just the fact that the telepathy tapes got so big, these autistic non-speakers have been proven to be telepathic. If you listen to the telepathy tapes, that is a revolution in consciousness. I mean, these people who were thought to be not even intelligent, and I met one of them, I interviewed one of them, and they are not only intelligent, they are multi-dimensionally connected. This one guy said he's from the Pleiades. I mean, he typed that out. So, I mean, this is a revolutionary time. There's people like Chris Bledsoe calling in the ships. I was with him in Washington, D.C. We are at a real change point. And maybe this object, whatever it is a doorway into kind of the next level of our awakening. I think these celestial objects, I mean, if you listen to astrology, signify, subconscious and metaphysical information that comes into the human sphere. So whatever it is, it's creating an energetic. Maybe it's an asteroid, maybe it's a comet, maybe it's a spaceship. Whatever it is, it's already having an effect on the culture.
If anything, right? Say that this isn't anything besides a comet. The fact that we're having the conversation now, more and more people are opening their conscience to we could be being visited, or even taking time to entertain that thought, or listening to Fox News and having someone speak to them with all types of certainty that chances are we could have had a visitation like this in the past, just moves us forward. I think the first step is everybody to know we're not alone. And as soon as we know that, the consciousness has now shifted for us to be open to eventually having first contact, open contact.
Well, we already know that. We're at a moment in history that is like going from an old world into a new world. And,
Exactly.
I was at the congressional hearings in Washington in September, last month, September 9th, and there were witnesses, government official, military, who talked about their ET contact in front of Congress and the world. And that was the first time anything like that has ever happened.